I just did this twice in a row with two different students. One was a junior who was stuck at an 1100 after months of tutoring, and another was a senior who couldn't break past the 1400 mark no matter what program she tried. Both of them hit a plateau, that frustrating point where progress just stops. And both of them broke through it in under 2 weeks. So let me show you what we did using real data from their prep results and more importantly, how you can help your child replicate the same breakthrough. Hi, my name is Hergis. He's a Berkeley alumnus turned SAT performance coach who helps students unlock 200 to 400 point score jumps without burnouts or endless drills. Over the years, I've had the privilege to work with dozens of families who felt stuck, and I was able to develop a system that turned those plateaus into real momentum again. So I want you to stick with me through every part of this breakdown because applying only half of it can actually set your child back instead of pushing them forward. And if you want my help and a personalized plan to break your child's plateau, there's going to be a link below this video where you can book a free strategy call with me and my team. But first, what exactly is this technique that I'm calling the score plateau reset? And why is it working so well for students right now, right? Here's what it looks like. So what exactly is a score plateau, right? It's a stretch of time when your child's practice test scores stop rising. Even though they're still studying, parents see the same number and over again, right? So for example, taking the test over and over again and your score plateaus around 1100 or perhaps it plateaus around 1400. It feels like the studying is not moving the needle. But here's the thing. Most plateaus aren't about ability. They're about feedback loops. Right. When your child keeps practicing in the same environments, the same methods, and the same mindset, the brain just stops adapting. Right. And that's where the score plateau reset comes in. When I moved to the US from the Congo, I barely spoke any English. I struggled to keep up with my classes, and I was never the smart one. Right. But nevertheless, I was the one who refused to stay stuck. I used to Berkeley majoring in chemical engineering. I learned something very powerful. Every problem, no matter how complicated they are, becomes simple once you find the right strategy, right? And that's the same mindset I teach my students today. Because a plateau isn't failure, it's feedback. And it's a signal that the strategy that you're currently using needs to change. So now let's talk about the score plateau reset. So there are a few things you need to know. The first one being you first need to understand what plateaus really are, right? What causes those plateaus. And after you understand those, you need to understand the score plateau reset framework, right? Why it works and when to use it. Okay, so let's start with what plateaus are. Like we discussed, right? They're basically feedback loops are basically stalling. So it's like you're doing the same things over and over again without you're not changing anything, right? So you're doing the same practice problems over and over again and you're seeing the same result and it's like the cycle keeps repeating, right? And what that causes is, right, it creates a like negative feedback loop basically, rather than a positive one. And your brain just stops adapting, right? So rather than doing that, we're gonna talk about what to do instead of doing this, right? So and what causes the plateau, like we just mentioned, right? It's a weak feedback, right? So you're not doing something to cause your brain to keep improving. Think about it like, say, for example, if you weight lift, right? If you keep using the same weights, right, and not getting stronger, right, not lifting heavier and heavier weight, you're not going to see any progress because your body does not feel challenged enough. It is the same way here, right? If you have a weak feedback, not going to work, right? You have no variation, nothing is changing, and that's the fastest way to get you to burn out, right? So what to do instead, right? So rather than just repeating the same thing over and over nonstop, right, you need to pause. Right. So what do I mean by pause? You do, for example, a full length practice test. Instead of doing another full length practice test, is that you first analyze the results of your full length practice test. Wait, what were your weakest areas? Right? Zone in on those. And for example, let's say it was geometry and trigonometry, right? Then you want to focus on those. You want to do smaller drills, right? You want to make sure you understand them very well. You want to perhaps do quizzes, short quizzes in here and there, because those small wins will accumulate and it actually boosts your confidence, right? It's going to start building that positive momentum, which you're going to carry with you when you're going to do your second third or whatever, the next full length practice test, right? So instead of just randomly just, okay, let me do another test, let me do another test. No, pause, analyze your results, see where your weakest areas are, focus on those, practice the smaller drills, right? Once you're sure that, okay, you've improved, right? Feel pretty confident about those areas, then you do another full length practice. And now you can compare basically, okay, I was at a 1200, right? And my weakest areas were information and ideas and geometry and trigonometry. And now, after, it depends on, like, it's up to you on how long it's going to take, depends on your pace, your level. And you're like, okay, after doing all of these drills, this is where I'm at, right? When you took the second test, do you see any improvement? If you see that information and ideas and trigonometry, geometry are still your weakest areas, that's what you should be focusing on. And you should perhaps look at your drills. What kind of drills did you do? Right? That means that the drills that you did not quite work, right? Rather than now doing all of this just bunch of topics that you have on the SAT, well, no, just focus on the ones that you're struggling in, right? So this is what it means, right? So you do targeted daily drills, right? Mini wins tracking, right? So, and again, these are the smaller assignments that I just mentioned, right? And this is how you're able to basically break this plateau, right? So why does it work, right? Because like I mentioned, right? It's like you're not just going blindly and just doing the same things over and over again, but you're actually focusing on what you're struggling in. And also, we've noticed something, right? It's like the more, for example, let's say you see improvement in your reading and writing section, sometimes those wins also transfer to the math section as well, and vice versa. And this is because the skills that you learn, for example, there is timing, right? And just like the confidence that you build. For example, when you see that, oh, I've improved in this, the confidence that you have, you will carry the same confidence into the next section of your SAT as well, right? So, for example, Demetrius, one of our students who had a terrible GPA when we started working together, basically they were doing poorly in all of their classes. However, but us working in the math, English section, and they were able to see an increase in their GPA. Their GPA went from a 2.5 to a 3.5, right? We didn't even study the other subjects, but just because they were able to now start to think critically, right? They were able to understand that it's okay to struggle for, like, for example, it's okay to look at a question and struggle with it and not just give up immediately, right? To kind of build that persistence, right? That resilience, right? Those skills, they've used the same skills in other classes as well, right? So it is the same concept here, right? So once you're improving in one area, especially when you're isolating those like subject, and you will see that that positive momentum will carry into different sections of your test as well, right? So when to use it, right? Well, if you're stuck, right, you're taking three tests, same scores, right? And you have low energy, low belief, you don't really believe that you can, you're probably like, yeah, I'm stuck here. I don't think I can do any better. Or you're losing motivation. It's probably time to stop whatever you're doing and focus on, using this framework, right? The score plateau reset framework, where you kind of like you pause and you focus on like your weaknesses and you focus on drills, and then before you do another full live practice test, right? And this is how you're able to break plateau. For example, Fola, right? When they started working with us, they were basically stuck at around 1100, right? They had an 1190 and then 1150, 1100. right? And their score, they had the same score over and over. They had low energy, right? They were using poor strategies. They had no idea what was going on, right? They were so burnt out, right? They believed that they had reached their ceiling, right? But when we started working together, right, parents started to see actually where they were like what they were doing, right? They understood the process, right? They started to believe that it was possible to break that ceiling, right? Their test day performance just drastically increased, right? They were stronger when it came to their timing, and they built that positive momentum. And the results was that they went from around 1100 to a 1400 plus on their test. I believe it was at 1440, right? So this is what, following this framework does, right? It breaks this very unknowing plateau that you're stuck in. So here's the takeaway. Plateaus aren't the end progress, right? They're the signal that something needs to change. Your child didn't reach their maximum full potential. It just means that the strategy needs to adapt. If you want me to map out exactly how to apply this reset strategy to your child's specific situation and their current score, I'm offering a few free personalized strategy sessions each month where we'll walk you through the process step by step and show you how to unlock the next 300 points. Right? All you need to do is reserve your spot by clicking in the link in the description below this video. Right? I promise you, your child is not stuck. They're just one reset away from breaking through.